Hey everyone, welcome to the last in our Activate version 11 series of webinars. Today we're talking about the order processing optimizations that we've made. I'm Eva Rhees and I'm the Client Solution Specialist here at Activate. As many of you are aware, Activate is more than just an inventory management software. Managing inventory from procurement all the way to the end sale to the customer is all managed in Activate. This offers you a single platform to keep up with operational tasks. As we push to update and enhance the system of Activate, one of our focuses is to simplify and streamline the steps involved in processing your orders. These new enhancements offer more intuitive next actions, better visibility and understanding while processing your orders, less manual intervention, and reduced initial and ongoing staff training. So today we're going to go through a quick overview of the changes, just so you know what I'm talking about when I talk about the configuration manager side of it. Then we'll go through the sales order process and finally the purchase order process with our new action buttons. All right, so to give you some context before we go into the configuration of these new options, I want to show you what I mean when I keep saying next action button. So the pig ticket is our next action button, and then you'll see to the right, you'll have a new action menu. The action button will change depending on the next step of the order fulfillment process, and the new action menu will offer a clear list of other options should you wish to bypass a step or go back to a previous one. These updates will start with quotes that need to be scheduled or booked, to orders that need credit approval, a pick list created, shipments packaged, and invoices prepared. We've also made similar changes to the purchase orders, and I'll go through that towards the end. So in previous versions of Activate, the order status of scheduled, backordered, and so on were separate from the workflow status. We've now combined the two in a way that quickly shows the status of the order when you open it. You'll still be able to change the workflow status of the order should you need, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So first, let's go into the configuration portion. And we know that a lot of customers have really custom workflow statuses, and that's completely fine. But it's a good idea to check out the setup of these statuses if you want to use them effectively in the new order optimizations that we've added. The most important part of the setup of workflow statuses is the status type that I've highlighted on the right here. The status type corresponds to default workflow statuses you'll need to make in the order options section of configuration. So for example, if I want to add a workflow status for another step in the fulfillment process that has to do with the order currently being picked, I would add a new status with the status type of I for pick in progress, showing that the order is still within that status, even while it's in my new custom status. Another thing to keep in mind is that these status types, in order to use them properly in the defaults for sales order options, you will need to have one status for every type. So if you don't like the wording on one of the default types, that's fine. You can change out the wording, but make sure that the status type, you have at least one of every one. To start configuring the use of the new order processing functions, you're going to need to set up the default workflow statuses for all of the different options highlighted here. If you have a custom workflow status that you would like to set up as a default under booked, pig ticket printed, pack list printed, partially invoiced, scheduled, or fully invoiced, then you need to make sure that your workflow status that you have set up matches the status type of each of the different options here. So booked is a status type of O. You're going to want to make sure that any statuses that you want to put within that booked default have the status type of O. Once all your workflow statuses are set up, you can move on to the order processing options. These three options give you the ability to either show or not show these buttons based on what you are currently doing in your order fulfillment process. If you go straight from picking to shipping and you don't do a pack list, don't check that button. If you don't have Package Manager, then the package shipment button isn't going to do anything for you either. So you'll want to make sure that you have these options selected and saved for your sales orders, and then you'll be able to use our new order processing buttons themselves. Since we've made some really similar changes to purchasing, let's talk really quickly about the configuration of those purchase order options. Right here, you'll see that the advanced purchase order statuses include entered, request for quote, and pending approval. Entered is simply a way to enter in the PO without issuing it. Request for quote is where you can send a RFQ to your vendor asking them to verify pricing and things like that. And the pending approval is for those companies that go through a process that requires a supervisor to approve the purchase order before sending it out to the vendor. So whatever your process is for purchasing, you're going to check those boxes, and then once you save that, you'll be able to use the new action buttons in purchasing as well. Really quickly, let's talk about our user permissions in regards to these action buttons. So the first one in the back that I've highlighted here, it talks about whether or not the user can issue purchase orders. So if you do have a approval process in your purchasing, then you can have some users where they do not have the ability to issue purchase orders, just enter them. And then you can have supervising users or management users that do have the ability to issue the purchase orders to go through and actually approve the PO itself. This isn't any different than the previous versions of Acctivate, but I wanted to show this because it is relevant to what we're talking about with the different action buttons themselves. Now, if you look at the user permission in the front, we're highlighting the release held order permission. This permission is related to the credit status of a sales order. If the user has the permission set to yes, then the next action button of approve credit will show when the order is on hold, and it will allow the user to select to override the credit hold on that particular order. So now let's talk about the daily use of the new order processing optimizations in Acctivate. If your sales order process starts with a sales quote, great. You'll be able to enter in your sales quotes and turn them directly into sales orders by just hitting the schedule order button. If you need to book the order instead, or reject or cancel it, then the action menu will show you the other options related to the sales quote itself. So now I have a booked sales order. Instead of a sales quote, I have selected to book the order. And I can see that the next action button is still schedule order because that's what actually makes it a fulfillable order, is scheduling it. For those that don't know anything about booked orders are used for sales orders that have advanced past the point of being a quote. In other words, the customer has accepted the quote, but the booked orders typically won't be delivered for a significant period of time, whether that's a week or 3 months to a year, whatever that period of time is for you guys. A booked order will not allocate inventory to it, and that's the reason why you would want to use a booked order versus a scheduled order for a sales order that won't be delivered for a while. So that way now I can allocate inventory to the orders that need to be delivered currently. So when I'm ready to actually schedule the order, when we're nearing the point of fulfillment, that's when we're going to hit the schedule order button. So what if you create a sales order for a customer that's on a credit hold or over their credit limit with their balance, Activate's going to definitely allow you to create the sales order, but you're not going to be able to advance the fulfillment of the order until you have approved the credit. So previously, you could only approve the credit if you went to the customer tab of the order, and you'll see that it has a warning mark there. And then you could approve the credit just fine. Now, instead of hitting two things, you're just going to hit one. You don't even have to hit the edit mode or anything like that. You can just approve the credit right there. Also, you're going to be able to see really clearly on the sales order that it is on hold. So I can't do anything with this in the warehouse until the office actually approves it, if that's part of your process. Now, adding a dropship or special order item to the sales order will now show the Create Vendor POs button as the next action on the sales order. This will pop up the purchase wizard directly related to that order. And once that PO is created, the next action button will advance to the next stage, whether that's picking or packing. You can definitely choose to delay the creation of the PO and fulfill the rest of the order if it is a partially drop shipped or partially special ordered sales order. Or let's say you want to delay the creation of the vendor PO because that's something that another department does. That's completely fine. You can go to the action menu and select any of the other options for proceeding to fulfill the rest of the sales order. Now we have a scheduled sales order, which is what most companies that use Acctivate have set as their defaults for new orders. You'll see here that my order is set to ready to pick, and my next action button shows as print the pick ticket. So this gives me the option to print the pick ticket at this time. Of course, let's say I'm doing pick lists instead, and so the button's going to be different. It's going to say create pick lists instead of print the pick ticket. And then the action menu will have the alternative options for what happens next if you don't print pick tickets. Let's say if you're using mobile devices, so you don't print pick tickets, you can then email or print another document to somebody else or change the workflow status of the order or any of the other options shown here. We also allow you to skip the next action button should you need to in the event that this order isn't your typical sales order and so it doesn't need to go through the full process. Maybe you need to invoice it right away, whatever the case is. So the action buttons are meant to show what the typical next step is for the fulfillment of a sales order. There's always going to be some orders though that just don't fit the normal mold. So we definitely allow you to override that. Once you've printed the pick ticket or created the pick list, whichever one, you'll either be prompted to print the pack list or not. If you have selected the button to show the pack list, then you will see that in your next action button when the order is either pick in progress or marked as picked. So this is the button that shows up for that third option we talked about in Configuration Manager. This button relates to packaging shipments in Package Manager. This package shipments button will only package the shipment for this one order, and so you won't be able to combine sales orders into one shipment if you use this button here. The package manager that I'm talking about does come with the EDI sales module. So if you do have EDI sales, you do have the ability to do package shipments. If you're using ShipStation with Acctivate though, and you don't use package manager, instead you'll see the send to ShipStation button. The reason you'll see a ShipStation button is because ShipStation is different than the other shipping workstation modules we work with. And we actually send the orders to ShipStation. So when the order is ready to be shipped, when you're actually ready to do the label in ShipStation itself, you'll be able to select to send this sales order to ShipStation. You will be able to also send multiple sales orders at one time to ShipStation through the Order Manager. If you don't have either of these modules, Package Manager or ShipStation, then your next step will just be the last step to a sales order, which is to create the invoice. When your order is marked as shipped, whether that happened through Shipping Workstation, Package Manager, or through just a change of workflow status on the order, your next action button will show as Create Invoice. Creating the invoice is the last step on a sales order, unless you're only partially fulfilling it. If you are partially fulfilling it, then once you have created the invoice for the items that you did fulfill, then you will see the workflow of the sales order change to partially invoiced or whatever you have put for that workflow status. And now you will see the schedule order button again. When I'm ready to start fulfilling the back ordered portion of my sales order after receiving the items, that's when I would hit the schedule order button. Now that the order has been invoiced in full, you'll see that the next action button has remained as the Create Invoice button because there's no more steps to complete for this order. It has been fully invoiced and shipped, and the customer has received everything. So to talk a little bit about our different options that we have in the action menu, first one is that print button that you see. The print button actually is a little bit different than what it used to look like. We used to have two separate buttons, one for printing pick tickets, one for printing packing slips. Now you see that they are combined. I can print a pick ticket, a pack list, a bill of lading, shipping labels, all from one print button. The email button you see just underneath it is the same exact list that you see right now. It's just emailing them instead of printing them. If you go to the top menu of this sales order and actually hit the printer button that you see there, that printer button is the sales order documents itself. So when you need to send the sales order as a confirmation to your customer, then you would use that. I also wanted to show you that yes, you definitely can still change the workflow status of an order. Instead of hitting edit and then the drop down of workflow statuses, instead you'll just go to the action menu and select the status you want to change it to. So no need to be in the edit mode. All right, so let's talk about purchase orders. Purchase orders are really similar. They don't go through the same steps, but we did make a lot of similar changes as far as the next action button goes. All right, so the entered PO that we're looking at here is my first step in creating a PO. That's not to say that it's yours. You'll notice here that we actually have two action buttons. And these two are to do the request for quote and to just go ahead and issue the PO. If I have permissions to issue the PO, I can select that. If I want to go through the process of actually requesting the quote from the vendor, I can use that option. We're going to give you both there just in case you don't want to go through the request for quote process every time you do a purchase order. Now this is my request for quote PO. Pretty simple. I can issue the PO here, and then the actual action menu that we see gives me the ability to revert it back to entered, or I can cancel the PO. Since it's not an issued PO yet, there's not really a lot of options as to receiving or invoicing because it's not a issued PO at this time. Once you have issued the PO, then you will have the two buttons that you are used to seeing in version 10 and previous version of Acctivate, the receive button and the invoice button. Sometimes you invoice before you receive. So we didn't want to take away the ability to invoice first. We're giving you the ability to do either one, and those are the two next steps. when I have an issued PO, I can actually revert it to a request for quote if I need to. These reverts kind of act in the same manner as changing kind of workflow statuses, except that they go in a certain order. So now that you have a completed PO, you've received everything, you've invoiced everything, there are no outstanding items on it, Acctivate's going to automatically mark it as completed for me, or rather prompt me to mark it as completed. And then my next action button will just be to reopen the PO. There's no more receiving to do, so the receiving button goes away. There's some more invoicing to do, so the invoicing button goes away. And those are only going to come back if I reopen the PO itself. Then I can add more items to it if I need to, or whatever the case is. Again, our action menu is pretty small for purchasing. It's just the ability to print off labels if you need to do those after you've completed the PO. Now, I wanted to show you what this one is. This is a pending PO. It's one that's been fully received and invoiced, but I didn't let Acctivate mark it as completed. So we have a new status called pending on these purchase orders that don't really meet the other workflows. All right, that's going to be all that I have for you on our slides, but let's go ahead and take some questions. All righty. So looks like we had a couple questions come in the chat while I was going over the slides. The one question that I see that's related to the webinar is about dropship purchase orders being created. The question is, let me find it. We're finding out that dropship POs must be done before completing the sales order. The button that you see on the sales order itself saying create vendor POs will disappear once you have invoiced the sales order itself. It is now a completed order, so Acctivate doesn't prompt you to create the vendor PO anymore. If you still need to create that vendor PO though, you can open up the purchase wizard itself. So you can go up to the purchasing menu and find the purchase wizard for dropship special order, and then you should be able to see your sales order that you just invoiced still in that list for items that need dropship POs to be created. The next action button is definitely just a suggested next action. Again, we're still going to allow you to do the other actions. That's why the action menu is there. So yeah, please feel free to put in your questions now. I'll wait a few minutes for any more that come in, and then we can conclude it. So this is a really great question. Will we be able to go backwards from a booked order back to a quote on the sales order window? Once the quote has been changed from a sales quote to a booked or scheduled order, there is no way to go back to a sales quote, but we have some great news. In version 11, we've also included the ability to copy a order, and you can actually copy it as a quote now. So if you need to take an existing sales order and put it back to the status of a quote, you can just cancel that original sales order, copy it as a quote, and now you have a new sales quote, just like you did before. Another question, is there or will there ever be a way to combine sales orders to create one cumulative purchase order? Yes, that's actually done via special orders, or you can use the reorder wizard. The reorder wizard is found in the alert section, and there's lots of knowledge base articles actually going over how to use the reorders themselves. The reorders actually will sorry, yeah, the reorders actually will tell you when you need to reorder any item based on its minimum stocking quantity, or just if you don't have any available in your warehouse currently. So we'll wait for a couple more questions. While I'm waiting for some questions to come in, I can go over again at the fact that the printing and emailing forms have moved. They are going to be definitely in that action menu that I showed before. You're still going to be able to print all of your forms that you had. They're just going to be in a different spot. All right, so that's all we have for you today. Our next webinar won't be for another month. It's going to be in May, on May 20th. We're actually partnering with Avalara. So we're going to talk about sales tax changes for retail, manufacturing, and distribution in 2020. If you have any additional questions, you can go ahead and email your questions to sales or support at sales@acctivate.com and support@acctivate.com. Thanks. Have a great day.